On his 18th birthday, instead of a celebratory cake and long-awaited gifts, Colton Reed received a black trash bag filled with his personal belongings from his foster parents, along with a shocking confession that shattered everything he thought he knew about his own life. "We only took you in for the government payments," declared Beverly Reed, his foster mother, her fingers deftly flying across a calculator as if tallying the profits from 18 years. $1,500 a month, Colton. You were a steady source of income, but now that you're 18, the payments will stop. Colton Reed, that's what he had been called for 18 years. Beverly Reed, the woman standing before him, was the only mother he had ever known. At 52, she worked as a bank teller and, as it turned out, viewed Colton as a profitable financial investment that had finally paid off. Beside her, avoiding eye contact as he usually did during conflicts, sat Harold Reed, his foster father. He managed a warehouse at a hardware store and had passed on all his knowledge of engine repair to Colton. Now, Colton realized these lessons were likely just a way to keep him occupied, not an expression of paternal care. "Are you joking?" Colton whispered, his voice trembling. "Today is March 15th, my birthday. Are you seriously telling me this on my birthday?" Harold shifted in his wooden chair, the same one he had sat in silently at dinner for 18 years. "The adoption subsidy stops when you turn 18. Those were the terms of the deal." "A deal?" Colton's legs buckled. He was their son, not a bargaining chip. Beverly finally looked up from her calculator. Her gray eyes were cold as ice, and now Colton understood the reason for that coldness. "No, Colton, you were a ward of the state whom we agreed to foster in exchange for compensation. We fulfilled our contractual obligations: food, shelter, education. The contract is complete." She stood and walked to the kitchen corner, where the black trash bag, like a sinister growth, stood out against the white wall. "Your things are here, only personal items. Everything we bought remains our property." Colton stared at her hands, the hands that packed his school lunches, though now he understood she only included the minimum required by state standards. The hands that signed his report cards, though she never cared about his grades beyond whether he was passing. The hands that, in 18 years, had never reached out to comfort him when he was scared, hurt, or sad. "You have until noon to vacate the premises," Beverly continued, returning to her seat. "That gives you 2 hours and 13 minutes to pack." Harold finally spoke, his words a soft whisper. "Beverly, maybe we could give him a few days to think things over." She shot him a look that had silenced him 1,000 times before. "The mortgage payment is tomorrow, Harold. We need to list the room on Craigslist this afternoon. Someone has already called about renting it." They were renting his room? Reality crashed over him in waves. They already had someone lined up. "It's not your room," Beverly corrected. "It never was. You are a long-term guest whose stay has come to an end." Colton stood in the kitchen where he had eaten for 18 years, looking at these two people he had called Mom and Dad, for whom he had made Father's Day cards in elementary school, whom he had tried so hard to make proud. Harold avoided his gaze. Beverly returned to her calculator, engrossed in other figures, other computations, as if divesting an 18-year investment was just another Tuesday morning transaction. "I have nowhere to go," Colton said, hating the quietness of his voice. "I have $47 in my wallet. Where am I supposed to go?" Beverly pulled a brochure from her perfectly organized folder. Of course, she had a folder. Of course, she had prepared for this, like a business presentation. On that fateful day, she approached the conversation with a chilling business-like demeanor, as if preparing for an important presentation. "There's a shelter downtown," Beverly stated dryly. "They take people 18 and older. The address is attached." A homeless shelter. The woman who had been his mother since infancy was instructing him on how to get there, as if dictating a recipe for her signature lasagna. "Please," he pleaded, already anticipating his self-disgust for this weakness, but in that moment, desperation overshadowed everything. "Just give me a week. I'll figure something out, earn enough for rent." "How?" Beverly asked, her tone leaving no doubt about the predetermined answer. "Your part-time garage job, 30 hours a week at minimum wage, won't cover half the market rate for rent." As always, she was right in her calculations. He had been saving for college and had managed to accumulate $800 over 2 years. That wouldn't even cover a security deposit. Harold, unable to bear the suffocating guilt any longer, abruptly stood up. "I'm off to work," he mumbled, grabbing his keys from the hook by the door. Lingering for a moment, he placed his hand on the doorknob and, without looking at him, tossed out, "Good luck, Colton." Then he left, and the sound of his truck starting in the driveway left him alone with Beverly, her calculator, and his pathetic bag of belongings. "Time is of the essence," Beverly said without looking up. "I have an appointment at 11:30 and I'll lock up when I leave." He walked over to his bag and picked it up. It weighed almost nothing. 18 years of life, and all his possessions fit into one trash bag. He peered inside. Clothes, a few books, a toothbrush, a watch his boss had given him for Christmas. Nothing from Beverly or Harold. No family photos, no mementos, not a single piece of evidence that he had ever been a part of this family. "Did I ever mean anything to you?" he asked, not expecting an answer, but unable to stop himself. "In 18 years, was there ever a moment you felt something? Anything?" Beverly finally looked at him, truly looked, and for a split second he thought he saw something akin to regret in her eyes. But then she glanced at her watch, the same practiced, efficient gesture he had seen 1,000 times. "You were an obligation we successfully managed. We never hit you, starved you, or violated the terms of our agreement with the state. That should be enough." But it wasn't enough. It would never be enough, and standing there with the bag containing his entire existence, ready to step into a world where he suddenly had no place, he realized that some people could raise a child for 18 years, seeing them only as a source of monthly payments. "Goodbye, Beverly," he said, not calling her mom for the first time in his life. She had already returned to her numbers, adding and calculating in her neat, orderly life, which would now, after the removal of the annoying impediment of another person's child, continue strictly according to plan. Growing up with the Reeds in suburban Dallas wasn't ideal, but he convinced himself it was okay. Every family has its quirks, right? That's what he told himself when Beverly introduced him at bank events as Colton, their adopted son, with an unwavering emphasis on the word adopted, as if clarifying he was a rescued shelter dog. Harold would just nod, sipping his watered-down beer, never correcting her, never interjecting to say, "Our son" was enough. They adopted him when he was 3 months old. He knew little about the circumstances. He was a ward of the state, and they were approved foster parents with the goal of adoption. Beverly kept the documents in a locked cabinet in their bedroom. In 18 years, he had seen her open it only twice, and both times she quickly slammed it shut when he entered, as if he had caught her counting money he wasn't supposed to know about. The house was modest, but clean. A single-story, 3-bedroom structure with beige walls, beige carpet, and everything beige. Beverly considered color an unnecessary expense. Beverly held the opinion that color was an unnecessary expense. She often repeated that neutral tones were always in style. Similarly, she argued that generic brands had the same ingredients as expensive ones, and that heating the entire house made no sense when warm sweaters were available. Every decision she made was dictated by a desire for maximum efficiency and minimal cost. Harold, for his part, taught him practical skills, though he now understood that this was likely just a way to keep him occupied. He taught him how to change engine oil, rotate tires, fix a leaky faucet, and patch drywall. "A man should be able to do everything with his own hands," he would say, handing him a wrench. However, Harold never allowed him to touch his pride and joy, a 1969 Mustang that he kept meticulously covered in the garage. "That's not for kids," he would snap, even when Colton was 17 and long past being a child. Now he realized that he probably would never have been old enough in Harold's eyes, because he was never truly his own. The locked room in the basement should have been the first red flag. He was told it was just a storage room, but sometimes he heard Beverly talking on the phone there. Her voice was muffled, but he distinctly heard discussions of numbers, always numbers. As a child, he thought she might sometimes work from home. Now, he wondered if she was talking to social workers, confirming payments and discussing his case file. School became a kind of salvation for him. Not that he was particularly popular or brilliant, rather he was simply an average student. Unremarkable in the best sense of the word. Teachers liked him because he didn't cause problems. Classmates tolerated him because he could fix their cars cheaply in the school parking lot. He had friends he ate lunch with, but he never invited them home. And how could he? Their house was more like a museum where someone accidentally lived. Everything was in its place, but the house lacked warmth and comfort. At 16, he got a job at Jennings' auto shop. Old man Jennings, already in his 70s, was covered in tattoos from his Navy days and knew more about car engines than most people ever would. At first, he paid him unofficially, and when he turned 17, he put him on the payroll. "You have golden hands, kid," he would tell him. "Strong, patient. That's a rare thing these days." All the money he earned, minus the amounts Beverly took for unforeseen expenses, he put into a savings account. $50 a month for increased utility consumption, $30 for wear and tear on household property, $25 for administrative costs, which, he supposed, included the time she spent driving him to work until he got his driver's license. She had a detailed list. Of course she did. He bought his own clothes from thrift stores, paid for school supplies, and his prepaid cell phone. Beverly said it built character. Harold, as usual, remained silent, which was his primary contribution to most conversations. The 3 photos he mentioned earlier were formal and posed. One, when he was 5, in a suit at Beverly's cousin's wedding. Another, from his middle school graduation, because the school required it. The third, from his 16th birthday at the DMV when he got his driver's license. Beverly kept them in a drawer and never displayed them. The walls were adorned with generic prints from home goods stores, flowers and landscapes. Nothing personal, nothing to indicate a family lived in that house. Dinner was always served promptly at 6 p.m. Beverly cooked meals that could be stretched over several days. Sunday roast became Monday sandwiches, Tuesday soup, and Wednesday casserole. She had perfected this, precisely calculating calories per dollar and nutritional value per cent. They ate in relative silence, to the sound of news from the television. Harold sometimes grunted in agreement with a political opinion. Beverly cut the food into identical measured pieces. Colton's life was measured and predictable, as if divided into clear delineated segments. One day, as a teenager of about 14, he dared to bring up the topic of his biological parents. Suddenly, the atmosphere in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. "They couldn't provide proper care for you," Beverly snapped. "We took responsibility when others wouldn't. That's all the information you need." Harold, trying to soften the situation, quietly added, "No need to stir up the past, son." It was a rare instance of him calling Colton son, and this time it sounded sincere, without rehearsed phrases. Birthdays were celebrated formally, without much joy. Cards were usually generic, with a printed "Happy Birthday" and signed Beverly and Harold Reed. Christmas followed the same pattern, only practical gifts, socks, school supplies. Once he received a graphing calculator because it was necessary for school. The Christmas tree was taken down strictly on December 26th, without exception. "No point in wasting electricity on unused lights," Beverly declared unequivocally. Now, with the hindsight of years, Colton reinterprets the past. Every memory is tainted by the bitter truth. He remembers how Beverly meticulously tracked every penny spent on him, how Harold always introduced him to colleagues simply as the boy, how they avoided parent-teacher conferences unless attendance was mandatory, how they held quiet, interrupted conversations whenever he entered the room. Conversations that, he now understood, most likely concerned the monthly payments. Growing up without love leaves its mark. A person doesn't realize what they're missing until someone points out that void. Colton believed all families were built on mutually beneficial transactions. He thought all parents kept strict accounts of expenses. He felt that every child's home was just a temporary refuge that could disappear at any moment. At least in the last point, he was right. "Sit down, Colton," Beverly said that morning, without looking up from her calculator. The kitchen table was cluttered with documents, spreadsheets, and bank statements. "Now that you're 18, the payments will stop." Colton's stomach clenched, as if he had missed the last step on a staircase. "What payments?" Harold fidgeted nervously in his chair, the wood groaning under his weight. He was dressed in work clothes, probably dreaming of escaping to the hardware store where he could hide behind inventory lists and customer interactions. "The adoption subsidy checks, $1,500 a month for 18 years. That's why we took you in." The words crashed down on Colton like a hail of blows. He physically felt each one strike his chest, his stomach, his throat. $1,500 monthly for 18 years. He automatically began to calculate, even as his world shattered. $324,000. "That's how much you cost them," Beverly continued in a dispassionate tone, as if reading a grocery list. "We provided what the state required: food, shelter, education. The contract is fulfilled. You must leave by noon." "You're joking," Colton uttered, his voice trembling as if he were 13 again. "This is some cruel birthday prank." "You're going to laugh and bring out a cake now, right?" "Your things are in the trash bag," Beverly replied, pointing a pen towards the bag. "Leave the key on the counter, the garage door opener too, and the house key hidden under the fake rock. I know you made a copy." She knew about the spare key. Of course she did. Beverly always knew about anything that could cost her money or jeopardize her control. "I don't understand," Colton mumbled, though deep down he was beginning to understand. The pieces of the mosaic were falling into place, forming a picture he didn't want to see. "You raised me. I call you Mom and Dad. How can you just kick me out?" "You are legally an adult," Beverly snapped, finally looking up from her calculations. "We no longer have any obligation to support you. In fact, your continued presence here could complicate our taxes. We claimed you as a dependent, but now that the subsidy has ended, you're more of a burden than an asset." A burden. An asset. Colton was being discussed as if he were a car that had lost its value. Yesterday marked the moment of truth, when the sum of my uselessness in the eyes of my foster parents reached a critical point, outweighing all the scraps of usefulness I had ever brought. "Please," I pleaded, dropping to my knees right on the kitchen linoleum that I had meticulously scrubbed sparkling clean every Saturday for 18 years. "I'll find a full-time job. I'll dutifully pay rent, buy my own groceries. Just give me a month to get on my feet." Harold demonstratively turned away, staring at the wall as if seeing it for the first time. Beverly, without a word, simply pointed at the wall clock. "It's 13 to 10. You have until noon. Don't make this more difficult than it already is." I remained frozen on my knees, waiting for a miracle, some spark of compassion, a glimmer of humanity. But Beverly, like stone, returned to her calculations on the calculator, and Harold, pouring himself coffee, walked around me as if I were an inanimate piece of furniture. Standing up, I felt my legs tremble. 18 years, I whispered. 18 years I called you Mom and Dad. Does that mean nothing to you?" "You were well cared for," Beverly retorted. "You were provided 3 meals a day, dressed appropriately for the season, and educated in public school. You received medical and dental care in accordance with established state standards. You received everything you were legally entitled to." "What about love?" The question escaped my lips in a barely audible whisper. Beverly's fingers paused for a moment over the calculator buttons. "Love doesn't pay the mortgage, Colton." I shuffled to my room, the place I had called home for 18 years. The walls were completely bare, as Beverly disapproved of posters or any personal decorations. The furniture was simple, functional, likely purchased in bulk from some government supplier. Opening the closet, I saw my clothes, neatly sorted into 2 piles. The items I had bought were destined for the trash bag, while the items they had acquired remained. The laptop was left as it had been bought for school. The alarm clock also remained, an integral part of the room. A baseball glove given by Harold when I was 12 also lay on the shelf, though we never once played baseball. He had bought it only because it was required for school gym class, nothing more. In the bathroom, I looked at my reflection. Brown eyes, brown hair, average height, unremarkable build. I looked like any other teenager, and yet like no one. Was that why it was so easy for them? Because I was ordinary enough to blend into their gray lives without disrupting the color scheme. Returning to the kitchen, I found Beverly on the phone. "Yes, the room will be available this afternoon. $450 a month, utilities included, first month's rent and deposit required." She was already rushing to rent my room. While I was still in the house, she was busily arranging for my replacement. But this time, it wasn't about a foster child. It was about a paying tenant, a real asset. Who were my real parents? I suddenly asked. Beverly covered the microphone with her hand. What difference does it make now? They abandoned you. We are abandoning you too. I think it's perfectly logical. Do you know who they were? The state provided basic medical information for insurance purposes. Nothing else mattered for our agreement. Our agreement? That's what my childhood was. An agreement. Harold returned from the garage holding a $20 bill. He handed it to me, avoiding eye contact. For food, he mumbled, until you get on your feet. $20. After $324,000 spent on me, he offered me $20. I wanted to tear up the bill, throw it in his face, preserve some dignity, but I took it. Pride means little when you're on the brink of homelessness. Time's up, Beverly announced precisely at noon. She stood by the door, holding it wide open. We have appointments today. I picked up the trash bag, surprisingly light for containing an entire life. As I passed her, I stopped. Did you ever, for a single moment, consider me your son? She looked at me with her cold gray eyes, which had never radiated warmth. I considered you my obligation, and I fully fulfilled that obligation. The door slammed shut behind him with a metallic clang, severing him from his former life. He heard the deadbolt turn, then the chain lock click, and then silence descended, broken only by the muffled hum of suburban Dallas going about its ordinary life. Lawnmowers whirred, children played, families enjoyed their well-being, a world that for Colton Reed would forever remain out of reach. He stood on the sidewalk, clutching the ill-fated trash bag, with a paltry $20 in his pocket and a complete lack of prospects. The shelter brochure, handed to him by Beverly, was already damp with sweat in his palm, pointing the way downtown, an hour's walk away. His phone vibrated, bringing a merciless message. Beverly, you have been removed from our family plan. Service terminates at midnight. Plan accordingly. Even his phone number was programmed for self-destruction. Everything that connected him to his old life was methodically erased, like an unnecessary line in an accounting ledger. And Colton trudged down the sidewalk, not knowing where to go. Memories brought him back to that fateful Tuesday, June 20th, when everything turned upside down. He was sitting in his usual spot outside the Dallas Public Library, on the concrete steps, hidden from ubiquitous surveillance cameras, where security guards didn't bother those who looked respectable enough. 3 months spent in the homeless shelter had taught him the importance of appearance, daily cold showers, shaving with dull disposable razors from the shelter kit, washing clothes in dirty sinks. And then a man in a gray suit approached him, and Colton's body involuntarily tensed. The instinct developed in the shelter unerringly signaled danger. Gray suits usually meant police or social workers, and they rarely brought good news. But this man moved differently, purposefully, as if he was looking for someone specific and had finally found them. "Colton Reed?" he asked, presenting a leather wallet. His first impulse was to run. The streets had taught him that if a man in a suit knew his name, it wasn't for nothing. But he was tired of running, hiding, being a nobody from nowhere. Depends on who's asking. "My name is Vincent Morales. I'm a private investigator." He extended a business card, printed on expensive, embossed paper. "Was it true?" "I've been looking for you for 3 months. Your biological father hired me years ago, but the adoption records were sealed. When you turned 18 and applied for a job using your social security number, I finally got a lead." The words, biological father, sent an electric shock through his body. Vincent sat down next to him on the steps, unconcerned about his expensive suit. This small gesture of humanity meant more to Colton than the detective could imagine. "Theodore Brennan. He's been looking for you since the day he signed the adoption papers." "Looking?" Colton repeated, catching the past tense. "Looking? Why isn't he here?" Vincent's face darkened. It was an expression familiar to anyone preparing to hear terrible news. "I'm so sorry to tell you this way, but he passed away last week. A heart attack at his desk. He was still looking for you when it happened." The words seemed meaningless. He had spent 3 months dreaming that someone would come for him, that someone cared that he existed. And now that someone had come, but he was no longer alive. Vincent pulled out a tablet and showed him a photo. "This is him, Theodore Brennan." Colton stared at the screen, seeing his own face, 30 years older. The same brown eyes, the same jawline, the same slight curve of the nose. But where his eyes were tired and dulled, Theodore Brennan's eyes burned with determination and purpose. He was wearing a suit that probably cost more than Beverly and Harold's monthly mortgage, and he stood in front of a skyscraper with Brennan Oil Industries written on it. Oil, Colton mumbled, remembering Old Man Jennings's joke that he had oil in his blood. CEO and founder, Vincent confirmed. Started with one oil rig 20 years ago and built it into an empire. He never married, had no other children. He said he couldn't until he found you. He was convinced he couldn't move on until he found you. Why did he reject me? The question was a searing cry from his soul. Vincent held out another older, grainy photograph of a young man, barely out of his teens, holding a baby. He was only 22 when you were born. Your mother, Emily Colton, died during childbirth due to unforeseen complications. Theodore's parents convinced him that he couldn't raise a child alone, that you would be better off in a complete family with two parents. He signed the relinquishment papers, but realized his mistake a week later. A week later? Anger began to surge. He regretted it a week later, and it took him 18 years to find me? He immediately tried to annul the adoption, but you had already been placed with the Reeds. The information was sealed. He spent 18 years and millions of dollars trying to overcome legal obstacles. He hired private investigators, lawyers, even lobbyists to change adoption law in Texas. I became his 14th private investigator 5 years ago. Vincent pulled out a thick folder of documents. 3 years ago, I traced you, found the Reeds. But when Theodore tried to make contact, they threatened legal action, restraining orders, accusations of harassment. They knew he was looking for you, Colton. They knew, and they hid it from you. The rage that consumed him was pure and scorching. Beverly and Harold knew. Someone wanted him, desperately searched for him, and they hid it to keep getting money. He was supposed to be here, Vincent continued. The plan was to meet you on your 18th birthday, when the Reeds would lose legal authority. But the heart attack happened on March 13th, 2 days before your birthday. March 13th, while he was stocking shelves at the auto shop, wondering what he would say to Beverly and Harold at dinner on his birthday, his father was dying at his desk, still trying to find him. There's something else, Vincent said, standing up. We need to go to the lawyer's office. There are documents you need to review, decisions you need to make. Decisions? He chuckled, but there was bitterness in his voice. I live in a homeless shelter. I only have one pair of shoes. What decisions do I even need to make? Vincent looked at him with sympathy. Theodore Brennan left you everything. Every cent, every asset, every share. You're about to become one of the wealthiest people in Texas. He stood on the library steps, where he had spent so many afternoons filling out minimum wage job applications, getting rejected by fast food restaurants for being overqualified because he had graduated high school, and tried to comprehend what he had heard. I don't understand, he said. He didn't know me. I could have been anyone. I could have been a terrible person. You're his son, Vincent simply replied. That was enough for him. He always said, I don't need to know him to love him. I loved him from the day I lost him. The drive to the lawyer's office felt surreal. Vincent's car smelled of leather and coffee, cleanliness and luxury. The air conditioning worked flawlessly. Classical music played softly on the radio. It was the complete opposite of every bus ride to job interviews, when he hoped his deodorant wouldn't fail and prayed his clothes didn't smell of the shelter. He talked about you constantly, Vincent said, as they drove through parts of Dallas he had never seen. Gleaming glass towers and manicured lawns. Every meeting ended with an update on the search progress. Every success was measured by how much closer it brought him to you. Board members joked that Brennan Oil was actually an 18-year funding mechanism for the search for Colton Reed. Did he know anything about me, about how I was living? He was aware that the Reeds were receiving adoption subsidies. It killed him to know they were profiting from keeping you in the dark. He tried to offer them money, 10 times the state payments, just to allow contact. They refused, claiming any communication would be detrimental to your well-being. His time in the shelter promised nothing good. Beverly, like a soulless accountant, had valued his life, using his well-being as a bargaining chip. The lawyer's office was on the 40th floor of a skyscraper he had walked past countless times, but never dared to enter. The elevator ride felt like an ascent into another world, one of impeccable style and confidence, where the future didn't depend on the whims of strangers. Ms. Chen, the lawyer, awaited him in a conference room with panoramic windows overlooking Dallas. The city stretched out below, and somewhere down there was the shelter, where his bunk was probably already prepared for someone else. "Mr. Reed?" she said, and he almost corrected her, almost saying that wasn't quite his name. But what was his real name then? "Please, have a seat. We have much to discuss." Ms. Chen placed a sealed envelope on the table, on which the name Theodore was written in a shaky hand. "Your father wrote this on the morning of his death. He insisted it be given to you personally, unopened." His fingers trembled as he broke the seal. Inside was a handwritten letter on company letterhead and a small brass key with an address tag. The letter, written in a hasty script, spanned 3 pages, as if the author knew his time was running out. "My son, if you are reading this, it means I didn't get to you in time, but at least you were found. Your mother died in childbirth. Her name was Emily Colton, and she was the love of my life. You have her smile, though you probably don't know it. I was only 22, scared and weak. My parents convinced me that a single father, especially one as young and inexperienced as I was, couldn't give you everything you needed. They had already contacted an adoption agency and found the perfect family, a stable couple who couldn't have children of their own. I signed the papers in a state of grief and confusion, and I regretted it within a week." He had to pause reading. The conference room seemed to swim before his eyes. Ms. Chen silently pushed a box of tissues towards him. "By then you were already far away, hidden behind legal barriers. I spent 18 years trying to break through them. The Reeds kept you, and the state of Texas considered the case closed. I tried everything, legal challenges, private detectives, even bribing court clerks, which cost me a fortune in legal fees when I was caught. But the attempt was worth it. The key opens a vault at the address below. Inside, you'll find everything I collected while looking for you. Every birthday gift I bought but couldn't give, every letter I wrote but couldn't send, and the truth about why finding you became my obsession." The letter continued. "Your mother's name was Colton. That was her maiden name. In your honor, I named the company's newest oil field Colton Reserve, which was discovered on your 16th birthday. It's the most productive field we own. I built an empire, hoping that one day it would be loud enough for you to hear my call. Every contract I signed, every deal I made, I did with the thought that maybe it would bring enough money to reach you. I'm sorry I wasn't strong enough to keep you. I'm sorry I wasn't fast enough to find you, but I never stopped loving you. Not for a single day. The fortune I leave you is not an inheritance. It's 18 years of apologies, expressed in the only way I could." Vincent drove him to the vault, located in an unassuming building in an industrial area of Houston. From the outside, it looked like any ordinary warehouse, but inside, beyond 3 levels of security, was a room that was breathtaking. The walls from floor to ceiling were covered with evidence of his search, private detective reports, thousands of age progression photos showing what he might have looked like at 5, 10, 15 years old. Every Colton Reed in America had been investigated. He spotted newspaper clippings from his middle school, an announcement of his making the honor roll, his name circled in red ink with the question, "Is this him?" in the margins. He had been so close so many times. In the very center of the room, a poignant display unfolded, gifts intended for 18 birthdays, each meticulously wrapped and signed by a loving hand. Here was a toy fire truck, like a greeting from a distant 4-year-old, with a touching note, "Every boy needs his own fire truck." Next to it, a baseball glove, a 9th birthday present, accompanied by a promise, "I'll definitely teach you how to catch a ball." And here were a set of car keys, intended for his 16th birthday. Your first car, a Mustang, just like your mom loved. The car, apparently, patiently awaited its moment in the warehouse, but his gaze was involuntarily drawn to a writing desk. On it, like precious relics, lay hundreds of letters, neatly sorted by date. One, dated to his 13th birthday, was chosen at random. "Colton, today you turn 13. I wonder if you're into science. At your age, I loved chemistry until I discovered oil and gas engineering. I hope someone is teaching you to throw a curveball. I hope someone tells you they're proud of you. I'm proud, even from afar. Today I received your school picture, purchased from a company that sells yearbook photos online. In the picture, you look serious, thoughtful. Your mother had the same expression when she was focused. I carry your picture with me everywhere. The board members probably think I'm crazy, pulling out a school picture of a boy I've never met during million-dollar negotiations. But you bring me back to reality. You remind me what I'm doing all this for. It's all for you. Vincent, like a silent guardian, stood by the door as his eyes eagerly devoured letter after letter, year after year, a father's love captured on paper. Then his gaze landed on a folder that turned everything upside down. Failed adoptive reunion, the Reeds. Inside were documents, legal correspondence, emails. It turned out Theodore had found him 3 years ago. He had desperately tried to make contact, sent letters, even showed up at the house once. However, Beverly and Harold met him with lawyers, threats of lawsuits, and a restraining order. Among the papers were photos of his house, him walking to school, getting into Harold's truck, working in the garage. His father had watched from afar, legally unable to approach. One email from Beverly to Theodore's lawyer was highlighted. Mr. Brennan's attempts to make contact violate our family structure. Colton is thriving under our care and does not need the confusion caused by biological parent interference. Any further attempts at contact will result in criminal charges. The monthly subsidies we receive from the state are irrelevant to this matter and should not be considered a motive for retaining custody. She knew. She knew everything and hid it to keep receiving her monthly payments. At the very bottom of the folder, a USB drive was discovered labeled Last Message. Vincent pulled out a laptop and we plugged it in. Theodore's face appeared on the screen, the recording dated a week before his death. He looked exhausted, but resolute. Colton, tomorrow I'm flying to Dallas. Vincent has finally confirmed that you're turning 18 and will be free from the Reed's control. After 18 years apart, I'll finally meet my son. I've rehearsed what I'll say 1,000 times, but I know I'll just cry. I hope you can forgive the cowardice of a young man. I hope we can build something with the time we have left. I've booked a table at a restaurant for your birthday, a nice place that serves that chocolate cake everyone seems to love for birthdays. I've never seen you blow out candles, make wishes. I have 18 years of wishes accumulated. All of them are variations of the same thing, to bring my boy home. I love you, son. I'm coming for you. Nothing will stop me this time. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. on March 12th. He died at his desk 6 hours later, planning their reunion. Vincent broke the silence. Paramedics said he was clutching a plane ticket to Dallas in your photograph when he died. I sat in that vault, surrounded by 18 years of love I never received, gifts I never opened, letters I never read, and felt the full weight of what had been stolen from me. Not just by Beverly and Harold, but by fate, by time, by a heart that stopped beating 2 days too soon. Just 2 days later, Ms. Chen, as if anticipating a moment of truth, retrieved information from her tablet that was about to turn the young man's life upside down. She stated the value of assets belonging to Brennan Oil Industries, estimated at a colossal $91 million. This impressive list included 4 luxurious mansions located in different parts of Texas, each fully paid for. An additional bonus was a private island stretching off the coast of the Gulf of Mexico, acquired by his father in the year of the young man's 10th birthday and symbolically named Colton Island. Diverse investments in liquid assets completed the picture, adding another $30 million to the total fortune. "All of this is yours, Mr. Brennan," she pronounced, and in those words resonated an echo of a new reality. Brennan. For the first time in his life, the young man heard his name spoken with respect and recognition. At 19, he became the CEO of an oil company, the intricacies of whose management he had yet to master. Board members, who for 18 long years had witnessed Theodore's tireless search, became his mentors, sharing memories of his father that he could never have received personally. They spoke of his determination, of spontaneous weekend flights to different states, of every lead that brought him closer to his son. Of the school photos carefully kept in his desk drawer, obtained from publicly available websites, of how every important business decision was accompanied by the question, "Will this help me find my son?" The mansions initially felt alien, too large, too empty, as if inhabited by the ghost of a man he had never known but who had loved him more than anything. One of them, The house where Theodore had lived, the young man left untouched, preserving his bedroom in its original state. His father's cologne still sat on the dresser, and his reading glasses lay on the nightstand, marking a place in a book about adoption law reform that he never finished. Sometimes the young man would sit in Theodore's study, surrounded by his handwritten notes about him, and talk to him as if he were there, telling him about his day, the company, the life his father had made possible. The other 3 mansions were transformed, becoming temporary homes for foster care graduates and homeless youth. The Dallas shelter, where the young man had spent 3 months eating stale sandwiches and falling asleep on a cot permeated with the smell of disinfectant, now received a monthly donation, ensuring that no one went hungry or cold. The shelter director once asked why he didn't want his name associated with these charitable acts. The young man answered honestly, "It's not charity when you've been in their shoes yourself, it's just paying the universe back." Vincent continued to work for him, but his duties changed. Now he helped the young man find other lost children, other biological parents desperately searching for their children lost in the system. Through their efforts, 12 families were reunited. Last month, they found a 17-year-old whom his biological mother had been searching for 15 years. The young man paid for their reunion dinner and watched from a table as they cried over untouched pasta. This was the moment Theodore was denied, the chance to shed tears over a birthday cake, making up for lost time. One day, the young man visited Beverly and Harold. They had moved into a modest apartment in a less affluent part of Dallas, with bars on the windows and a broken security gate. Harold worked 2 jobs at the hardware store, and Beverly worked nights as an accountant. Without the young man's monthly subsidy, their carefully constructed life had collapsed. "We gave you what you needed," Beverly said, opening the door but not inviting him in. There was no surprise or joy on her face at seeing the young man. "No," he replied, standing in the doorway in a suit that cost more than their monthly rent. "You gave me what the state paid you for, and Theodore, who never saw me, gave me everything. He gave me love that didn't require payment." Harold appeared from behind Beverly, looking older and tired. "Colton, we heard about your inheritance. If you could help us, after all, we did raise you for 18 years. The audacity of these words should have sparked anger, but the young man felt only pity. "You raised me for $324,000 in subsidies. By my calculations, you were paid in full." The reward had been paid in full. The past was left behind in their predetermined poverty without a single glance back. The secluded island, as if frozen in time, retains the untouched appearance Theodore left it in. The small house, built by his hands, is filled with items designed to appeal to a possible taste: fishing gear, despite the unknown passion for fishing, sports equipment for all kinds of activities, a collection of books on various topics. He prepared to welcome any version of his son, ready to love him regardless of who he might turn out to be. The island becomes a refuge in moments when the burden of managing his father's company feels overwhelming. The longing for the father he never got to know leads him to the pier built by his hands with the fishing rod he was given. Aimless presence in a space created for their shared future becomes the sole occupation. Memories of old man Jennings's words gain meaning, oil in his blood, not just a metaphor but a genetic reality inherited from a father who turned black gold into an empire in search of his lost son. Perseverance and refusal to give up. Another legacy. Every signature affixed as CEO becomes a sign of remembrance for a man who never stopped searching. The Theodore Brennan Charitable Foundation gave 40 children a chance to find real families. Careful selection ensures that this year, families are looking for children, not financial gain. The foundation covers all expenses, directing funds into trust funds for children, not for their guardians. Personal interviews with each family help identify lies and distinguish a house from a mere shelter, guardians from true parents, duty from sincere love. A letter from 7-year-old Marcus, one of the Place children, written in colored crayons, deeply touches his heart. "Thank you for my family. They read me bedtime stories. They say they love me even when I'm naughty. They hang my pictures on the wall." This letter is kept on the desk next to Theodore's last note. 2 generations of love, one lost, the other found. Money cannot erase the memory of 3 months of cold showers and shelters, or 18 years of emotional hunger. It will not bring back a father who loved from afar and passed away 48 hours before his first meeting with his son after he was 3 months old. But it provides the opportunity to ensure that no child repeats the experience he endured. Theodore's love, accumulated over 18 years, continues to live on, finding lost children, creating real families, establishing connections that, as Beverly and Harold proved, cannot be bought. This is what true love looks like, not in monthly payments or calculating exchanges, not in fulfilled contracts or discharged obligations. Love manifests in a person who spent 18 years and millions of dollars to say just 3 words he never got to utter: "Welcome home, son." Love is hundreds of unopened birthday gifts waiting in a vault, letters addressed to a phantom, a private detective hired to watch from afar due to legal restrictions, building an empire as a beacon, hoping a lost child would see the light and find their way home. Theodore Brennan passed away believing himself a failure, but he was not. He spent 18 years teaching unconditional love, unyielding hope, and creating beauty from loss and longing. He taught that true parents are not those who keep a child for profit, but those who are willing to sacrifice everything to ensure they are well. His father's last video is kept on his phone as a reminder of what love looks like, exhausted from 18 years of searching, holding a plane ticket to find his son, speaking of his love, and that this time nothing would stop him. Death interrupted his path, but not his love. Love found a way. Love always does. A relentless pursuit of purpose. That is what characterizes true love. Sometimes, in the quiet of night, images of that very birthday dinner, meticulously planned by his father, come to mind. He recalls the appetizing chocolate cake, chosen with special care, and the flickering candles that were never lit. In these dreams, he does reach Dallas, and the long-awaited meeting occurs. 2 people, connected by blood but until this moment strangers, sit at the same table. Their gazes reflect a shared past, and the same oil flows in their veins. He offers his sincere apologies, and the hero, in turn, expresses his understanding. Tears of remorse and relief moisten the chocolate cake, its taste symbolizing redemption. Then he awakens in his father's house, where he manages his company, bringing to life his dream of bringing his son home. And he realizes that the dream indeed came true, though not quite as either of them had imagined. Now he is home, within walls built by love, in a life secured by an unwavering will, in a future created by a father who never lost hope. Beverly and Harold, conversely, gave him up without hesitation as soon as the financial inflows ceased. Theodore, however, never gave up, even when his heart stopped beating. This is the fundamental difference between a simple transaction and a true transformation, between a temporary refuge and a real home, between people who merely provided care and one who truly loved. "Welcome home, son," his father seems to say. And now, finally, the hero has returned home.